The Green Revolution in India started in 1965, and that's when we saw an influx of high-yield varieties, productivity-boosting pesticides, fertilizers, and several steroids. And well, now we live in a world where one can argue that the grain we eat is almost entirely artificial. Hello and welcome, I'm Sadhika Tiwari and you're watching Eco India. And in today's episode, we try to answer the question, do we really want a hyper-productivity or do we want sustainability? And well, there are some farmers who have chosen the latter and are nurturing their relationship with nature. So let's go meet them. Grow local, eat local. Well, we've all heard this, but why all of this hype? Basically, when this is practiced in a true sense, not only do we ensure that we eat healthy and nutritious food, we also ensure that local and native plant and crop varieties continue to thrive and contribute to the rich biodiversity that we have. Well, here is a heartwarming story of ancient wisdom, traditional knowledge, and a plateful of local flavors.
Hoa Nhi pen khôi ya u ki rai Bangi nang yo ya ki ne ki sambai.
That ancient Khasi's folk song describes the close bond between humanity and nature. Richard Rani belongs to the 50 or so families who live here in the mountains of Cherrapunji in northeast India's Meghalaya state. The song asks nature for her gifts, like the wild plants growing among the flower beds.
These are garlic chives, which we eat. This is a wild edible. And then we have pineapples, which we cultivate. During the months of September and October, they are ready to harvest. And we cultivate pineapples on the edge of our plot.
Rani's home village of Nongtra is remote, and anyone who wants to visit has to scale 2,500 steps. The inhabitants here are an indigenous people. Through their traditional way of life, they make an important contribution to biodiversity. 3/4 of Meghalaya is forested, so people here grow their crops among the wild trees and shrubs. Agroecologist Gratia Dhakar works for the Northeast Slow Food and Agro-Biodiversity Society, or NESFAS for short. The NGO wants to preserve the region's traditional cultivation and nutritional practices.
So if we look at the way the indigenous communities have managed the food system, you will see a component of diversity, where you will see there is in a system, in any of the system, there is multi-cropping, where a variety of crops, say if we do through our mapping exercises, we have found that a community have about more than 202 food plants.
Just a few years ago, there was more diversity according to surveys by NESFAS. But slash and burn forest clearance and increasingly heavy rainfall have both taken their toll on the soil. In the 1990s, the local farmers of Nongtra started cultivating boom grass to earn a living. It's used for livestock feed to make brooms and fuel. But this monoculture has severely degraded the soil.
It is a highly competitive plant, and we can't plant this with the other crops because it damages the crop. But we plant it because of the high demand.
As market prices for broom grass rose, farmers cultivated more and more of it, to the detriment of biodiversity in the region. NESFAS has launched programs to revive what's been lost. Like at the Momiti Lower Primary School, where regional dishes are now back on the menu. Almonds have been replaced by the traditional chinka pins, peanuts by perilla seeds, and lettuce by the chameleon plant.
Today I'm eating Nutrella with pumpkin, cabbage with perilla seeds, rice and wild edibles. I find the food really tasty. My absolute favorite is the pumpkin.
The ingredients are supplied by local farmers. NSFAS has also helped to build a garden at the school.
We do a comparative study of the local food with the commonly available food, and oftentimes we try to promote that the nutritional content of our traditional food is way much more higher than the food that we buy from the market.
NSFAS now supports more than 130 villages in northeastern India. With the help of the ancient knowledge from the region, agriculture in the mountain forests is becoming more sustainable for future generations.
How did farming begin? The first agricultural revolution happened when humans realized that instead of just depending on the wild, we could also systemically grow our own crops. Cut to 2023, we now live in a time where natural farming is an actual thing, because farming in itself has become a very exploitative, unsustainable and sort of anti-nature activity with high yields and higher carbon footprints. But the farmers who are going back to natural farming are switching these practices to protect their soil, their water resources and even their crops from harmful fertilizers and pesticides.
Farmer Omveer Singh has been working his ancestral farm in northern India's Aligarh district for decades. But unlike his father before him or his neighbors today, he grows his produce quite differently, and people are starting to notice.
At a regional farming convention, I received an award from a committee of senior administrative officers for having the best quality potatoes of all the farmers.
Beyond the boundaries of his farm, for miles in every direction, huge estates grow thousands of tons of agricultural produce every year, mostly in the form of monocultures. The practice is dependent on an ever-growing use of large farm equipment, water, fertilizers and pesticides. Omveer Singh's farm uses none of these, and it looks nothing like a regular farm. He practices what is called natural farming, inspired by what he learned from Santosh Kumar Singh.
Multi-cropping का concept जो है natural farming में उसको हम लोग
We are helping our farmers develop multi-cropping using natural farming methods. We are growing a sort of an orchard here with 11 fruit varieties.
उसके बीच में हम लोग यहाँ multi-cropping में अभी देखिए
We also have fennel plants, green fodder plants, so that this develops like a mixed forest in which we select some plants which help fix nitrogen in the soil, while each plant also generates income.
और साथ ही साथ एक income का भी जरिया उसमें बन रहा है.
The core idea behind natural farming is to mimic the biodiversity of forests and to avoid human and especially chemical interventions as far as possible. Santosh Kumar Singh conducts regular workshops with his farmers' cooperative Braj Kisan FPO to convince more farmers to switch to natural farming. Farmer Aman Chauhan has been attending the workshops regularly to weave natural farming methods into his work. Back on his farm, he prepares a mix of cow urine and water, a good liquid fertilizer. It's dispersed over the land along a network of targeted canals, reducing total water consumption. In parts of the farm where the topsoil is nitrogen depleted due to long-term fertilizer use, he spreads dried cow dung. And he uses natural neem tree extract to protect plants that may be at risk from pests.
For the last 1.5 years, I have been using natural farming methods. I am slowly switching most of my farms over to natural farming. About 70% of my total land now is farmed naturally. In terms of yield, the land is slowly getting back to its natural fertility because for years I used a lot of fertilizers and pesticides. But now I don't need to spend on them. And I am expecting much better overall returns.
The initial transition to natural farming can be a stumbling block. Soil that has been subjected to industrialized farming, with its regular tilling, fertilizers, pesticides, and monoculture, takes time to adjust to new methods, and initially, yields go down. It makes many farmers uneasy, especially those in a lot of debt. But Santosh Kumar Singh says the transition is unavoidable. He's currently assessing the best combinations of indigenous soil mixtures and seed varieties, which need less water, are more resilient, and restore soil health.
The measure of the fertility of any land is its soil organic carbon content, which has drastically fallen over the years. The best way to increase it while farming is natural farming. So ultimately, if we want to keep farming sustainably in the long term, we will be forced to switch to natural farming methods sooner or later.
The government of India as well as the state of Uttar Pradesh are providing some support for farmers who are making the transition. They'll now get help from the government to find consumers for their produce.
We have decided that if any farmers switch to natural farming and they would like some help in selling produce, we have reserved an exclusive stall at the agricultural produce market.
Natural farming methods need to gain more acceptance among both farmers and consumers if India's agricultural landscape is to be reshaped. Omveer Singh and Santosh Kumar Singh are assessing the yield and quality of their last harvest, which was grown solely with natural farming methods. The lessons learned will inform their approach for the coming sowing season.
We now have better local seeds and have learnt how to use them, but without using any urea or DAP, and using only local materials instead. Now I am spending way less and making much more. Earlier we were focusing on monoculture. Now we have 2 or more crops at the same time. And altogether this has given us a lot of benefits.
India urgently needs a sustainable and resilient farming system that can combat the falling yields of industrialized agriculture and provide a better income for struggling farmers. The cooperative is still in its infancy, but its methods hold promise for both the soil and its creepers.
Well, sometimes we really like something until we forget about it. And then one day, years later, we rediscover it out of nowhere, and then we feel so happy. Well, India and the world are refinding their love for millets years later now. 2023 is the year of millets as decided by the UN. Well, let's go and meet this engineer in Tamil Nadu whose love for millets is a little more than us and is also benefiting others and the environment.
People in southern India are commonly known to love their rice, but this wasn't always the case. For centuries, millets were the staple grain in diets here. In Tamil Nadu state, former engineer Janakan has set out on a mission to protect and commercialize these age-old local millets.
I love growing trees. I was initially attracted to Fukuoka seed balls. So first, I experimented with tree seeds until I stumbled across millets. The numerous varieties attracted me, so I started studying and researching the seeds. Although there are numerous types of foxtail millets, we have all only ever heard of one type.
Janakan visited remote villages across Tamil Nadu. His aim was to win over as many farmers as possible to growing these older varieties of grains.
The farmers were not willing to grow millets. They said, who will buy them? So we started making value-added products incorporating millet and a huge variety of them. We process the paddy millet grains into everything from rice and powdered varieties to dry husk, dosa batter and chapatis.
The processing is done completely in-house at Janakan's own millet plant. With all operations under his control, he has developed a wide product range, and he's able to buy millets from farmers growing all of the 10 different varieties of millets.
Instead of using all 10 types, industrial companies only choose varieties that require less processing time or have better aesthetic properties. These seeds are then sold back to farmers, making them the only variety available in the market.
A resurgence of millets is helping farmers gain greater control over the seeds needed to grow these crops by reducing their reliance on seeds bought from large companies. Since these varieties are indigenous to the region, they are more resilient to climate fluctuations as well as pests. In the long term, the setup could help reduce monoculture rice production, which uses up large amounts of the region's limited water resources.
Everyone had forgotten about millets, including my parents. I last heard about them in my school days. Farmers have not grown millets in 10 to 15 years, but after meeting Janakan, I have started growing them exclusively. I was able to charge Janakan a good price for the millets, since he purchases it straight from farmers like me.
As a result of Janakan's efforts, these once forgotten millets are now sold in export markets like Singapore and the United States of America. And new markets have also meant a net positive effect on the earnings of the region's farmers.
Every summers, this tube well starts running dry, and that is the first sign of the depleting water table. In times like these, when rainfall is erratic and unpredictable, farmers rely on water sources like these to irrigate their fields. And often these fields have water-intensive crops like paddy or sugarcane, which in turn contribute to the depleting water table. Well, let's look at some unusual ideas that can keep our fields from running dry.
Heat has exacerbated an ongoing crisis in the US, water scarcity.
Water shortage has become a never-ending issue in an approaching global water crisis.
The lack of fresh water is not a future problem. Half of the global population experiences water scarcity during at least some parts of the year. Overconsumption, a heating planet and bad water management are draining our groundwater, rivers and lakes worldwide. By the middle of the century, every second country will struggle with limited access to water. To tackle this problem, we need to manage our water better. We need to reuse it and figure out ways to use less of it. But that alone may not be enough. Scientists think that we need to look beyond usual water sources like rainfall, snowfall, river runoff or groundwater. Frozen ice sheets in the Arctic store nearly 70% of all freshwater resources globally. Thousands of square kilometers of ice breaks off as icebergs every year and melts into the ocean, fresh water that is wasted.
The research has demonstrated that this opportunity does hold potential for bringing water from the northern hemisphere, where there is abundant water, to those areas where they need.
This is Mansour Kadir. He is lead scientist at the United Nations University in Montreal and author of the book Unconventional Water Resources. From a technological point of view, icebergs are already towed today. Ships from the oil and gas industry are pulling small chunks away from drilling platforms. But to provide a city like Cape Town with fresh water for roughly 10 weeks, we'd need something a lot bigger. An ice mountain weighing around 125 million tons. In comparison, a large cargo vessel weighs around 200,000 tons. And instead of pulling it just a few hundred meters, it would have to be dragged thousands of kilometers. It's a huge feat, but computer simulations from 2011 have shown that this is possible. Well, theoretically. It's still a long way from flashy 3D animation to reality. One Emirati company, the National Advisor Bureau, has patented the technology to eventually pull it off. But they still lack the funding to start a pilot phase. For now, the iceberg idea is proving too big a feat to solve today's problems. So let's look to something lighter, something that can be found pretty much everywhere, like air. You know how in the morning everything is covered with small droplets? Guess what these were before? Exactly, clouds or fog. Humidity in the air becomes liquid when it cools down. That's why a cold glass of beer is wet on the outside even though no beer spilled over. In nature, this usually happens in the evening and at night when the temperatures drop. And it's possible to take advantage of this phenomenon and harvest this humidity.
So fog harvesting has been practiced by indigenous people on virtually every continent.
This is Rebecca Farnham. She's a consultant and researcher at one of the most successful fog harvesting operations globally.
You've got some kind of material. This one's nice in 3D, so it's got a lot of physical surface for the water to get stuck on. And then as fog passes through, it's just a cloud, you can kind of see the spray coming through in front of the other bigger net. And then it gets caught on this net.
Put into practice, it looks like this. On the edge of the semi-arid Ain Bam Ram region in Morocco, there is very little rain. But for 6 months, a thick fog hangs over the region. And this fog passes through 1,700 square meters of mesh, which makes it the largest fog harvesting operation in the world. The fog condenses and drips into large underground deposits from where it is distributed via pipes to people's homes. The nets collect around 35,000 liters of water every day, which fulfills the needs of more than 1,000 people and is even used to water crops. Today, there are big fog harvesting operations in Chile, Morocco, Ghana, Eritrea, Ethiopia and South Africa. But the potential is much bigger. There are suitable sites almost everywhere. A 40 square meter net that yields about 200 liters per day costs roughly $1,500.
So the communities that would benefit the most from this particular technology are also those who are kind of most marginalized within countries. So getting the attention there and the kind of startup capital where it needs to be is an uphill battle.
Although capital is needed, fog harvesting is fairly cheap, scalable, and a great solution for people living in remote areas. But it's not an option for big cities. There's simply not enough fog, and cities need more water than nets can catch. Our last solution does not seem very crazy at first. But what's crazy is the amount of water we could save by implementing it. Leaking pipes are the reason we lose nearly 30% of all fresh water globally. That's a staggering 346 billion liters a day. To put that in perspective, that's 30 times more than German households consume per day, or more than 2 billion bathtubs a year. Perfectly good water we could use to drink, wash, clean, grow food that's just being wasted.
My son called me a plumber from space, so we are basically plumbers some of the times.
This is Lauren Guy. He co-founded the tech startup Astera. Plumbers is a bit of an understatement. Astera tracks water leaks from space. They make satellite images with the help of microwaves. The microwaves are reflected differently depending on which medium they hit.
From space, we can get within the city, underneath the asphalt, into the soil, into the pipes layer. So our algorithm is actually aimed to drinking water. We can say from space if the water on this bottle, for example, came from the tap, or if it's from rain, or from something else.
They're looking for the composition of the water. If it's drinking water, they assume it's a leak. And mostly they're right. The results look like this. Every dot on this map, for example, is a leak. And here too. A leak of over 120 liters per minute detected in Prato, Italy, or in Bangkok, or in Chinese cities. Astera sells those maps to utilities globally so they know where to fix leaks and save money. Locating leaks is only the first step in a long process. Fixing one leak might create new ones because it can affect the pressure within the pipes. Improving and renewing pipes and infrastructure is key to saving water and the nearly $40 billion that are going down the drain globally year on year. In the US, fixing pipes is even cheaper than recycling water. So where does all this leave us? There are plenty of ways to improve access to water. Iceberg towing sounds fascinating, but we are far off from implementing it, and there are other methods that are much easier to put into practice today. Like fog harvesting, that works in certain areas. It's a low-tech solution and quite cheap. But the biggest challenge is fixing our water infrastructure. This will be essential to stop wasting valuable clean water. We have the tools to do this. It's effective and just needs to be put into action.
While modern ways of life have really gotten us ahead and made our lives simpler in several ways, there are still certain aspects of life where ancient knowledge and traditional wisdom trump everything else. But you let me know what you think. You can write to us at ecoindia@dw.com. Keep coming back every week. Until then, take care. See you soon. Namaskar.